Hi, everyone. It's Alex Savidge from KTVU, Fox 2 News in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we want to talk about some of the latest headlines surrounding the coronavirus outbreak in this country. And to do that, we want to bring in Dr. Vanila Singh, clinical professor at Stanford School of Medicine and the former chief medical officer with the Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Singh, always good to have you on.
Great to be on. Thank you, Alex.
All right, so let's look kind of big picture at the country and where we are. I mean, obviously, still far too many cases and far too many people dying from the coronavirus. But if you look at just over the past couple of weeks, after we've seen surges in certain hotspots, the 7-day average with cases was down about 10,000 or so cases per day in the country. So a bit of encouraging news there. What do we take away from that? Are we maybe starting to see things plateau?
Yeah, absolutely. We're certainly hoping for that. That's the purpose of the 7-day and 14-day weekly averages, is to identify the trends that might allow us to go and address spikes or outbreaks, and also to see if, in fact, where we are right now is in fact moving in the right direction. And that has been very promising. Same with California. The total number of lab confirmed tests today was 4,600 plus. And that's also a decrease in the right direction. So nationwide as well as statewide, it looks like we're moving in the right direction. Add to that the drop in hospitalizations that's been significant across the state in California. And certainly the mortality rate, which has been really important, the infection mortality rate. So all in all, we are seeing a good trend. I know that we are better and better at keeping track of data and interpreting it. And certainly we will likely learn early on, of course, if there are localized cases in the state at a city or county level, but across the nation, if in fact that trend changes due to either reopening efforts or large gatherings, or just efforts in terms of better understanding where the virus may be transmitting.
All right, so what do you think in terms of testing? Are we at this point testing enough people to really get a handle on how much the virus is spreading within communities in this country?
Well, we can always want more testing. One thing I would say is that our testing efforts have ramped up so significantly. We're testing likely on a per capita basis, almost more than anybody nationwide. It's a huge endeavor. We do want people to test more, particularly if they have come out of a situation where they may be suspicious. But I always say two things. One is testing is only as good as that day. If your test is negative and reliably negative, you could still encounter a situation the next day or a few hours later where you get exposed again to the virus. So the testing is important only in confirming what we may be suspicious about, or in terms of testing a group of people who may have had a potential exposure. But if you do believe you have the virus or could have been exposed, while you're waiting for a test, just self-quarantine yourself. That will ensure that we're taking the steps that are most conservative and least likely to transfer that virus to somebody else while you're waiting for that test. So that's really the most important takeaway in all this. But yes, we want more testing. We have ramped up those efforts, and we have lots of different testing types right now.
Yeah, no, and to that end, you talk about people waiting for those test results, and of course we've talked about the backlog in terms of people trying to get those test results and the long turnaround times that some people are experiencing to get their results. One way, one thought that's out there that people have to try to address that is these more rapid tests, antigen tests. They get you the results very quickly, but on the flip side of things, there's a lot of questions about how accurate they are. So the question, you sort of weigh those two things. You can do more tests more quickly, but how accurate are the results? How do you weigh those two, and how do you square them?
That's exactly how to say it, is that, what we are doing is we're trying to find ways to get a more rapid answer than what the molecular PCR test does. It takes time, it takes reagents. So it would be nice to know in a quicker fashion, particularly those who we're not super concerned about in terms of exposure or symptoms. And so, for example, the antigen test is a great way to get a more rapid answer, but it comes at the cost of sensitivity. So for example, if you have a positive rate, it's more likely with the antigen test, which is testing just the protein, to have a positive rate. But if you have a negative, it could still have false negative rates. Therefore, it is a little bit less sensitive when compared to the molecular testing. And we know this is true with a lot of things in life. You get something and you give up something else. In this case, you are gaining the rapid ability to get test results at the cost of perhaps the sensitivity. And same with even the saliva test, another great test that has come out of Yale, another means in terms of getting an easier ability to test, but of course will not be as sensitive and accurate as the molecular test, because that's the gold standard, but it will be less expensive and less invasive.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because the FDA has granted, a few days ago, they granted the emergency use authorization for this saliva-based test that was developed by researchers at Yale. And so you're saying in terms of reliability, is it sort of similar to where an antigen test is? And you know, you would get the results just as fast, right? I mean, this is rapid results.
Absolutely. This makes the testing for COVID a lot more accessible, ideally. And that's really been the purpose behind the Saliva Direct company that's doing this thing. One is to eliminate the expensive saliva collection tubes that other companies might use to preserve the virus for detection through the molecular means of testing. And it also, so it doesn't have to really preserve that sample. It's just quick, easy to collect, and cheap. It's actually pretty cheap compared to the PCR test. So it has also been tested and validated with reagents and instruments from various different vendors around more accessible means. Testing is only meaningful for up to the time that you're doing it. And you may need to actually go back and get tested again, suspicion for exposure. But you know, people who are in essential industries and airlines and hospitals, etc., need to get tested pretty often potentially. And this also lets the public do it. And again, the cost and the ability to preserve the sample is, amongst other things, makes it really much easier.
Yeah, the ease and the accessibility, you value that quite a bit from a public health standpoint, right? Being able to get a lot of people tested and making it easy and accessible. Let me ask you about some of the latest treatments that are out there for treating COVID-19 patients. And obviously, we've seen so many treatments just develop since this disease and this virus first emerged. You know, there have been so many improvements in terms of how medical professionals are treating COVID-19 patients. And one thing that I know has been out there quite a bit, but I was just reading about this the other day, is convalescent plasma treatments. And Plasma Technologies, a company, actually signed a contract with the Department of Defense to develop these treatments. They're faster. They're easier in terms of treating COVID-19 patients. Talk about exactly how this works and how effective this is as a treatment for people who are dealing with the disease.
Absolutely. So as we move from testing, now we're coming into this area of where people actually are positive for COVID and have likely developed moderate to severe symptoms. And these are the folks that we worry about, coupled with if they are vulnerable or have, age, are elderly. How do we ensure that we can get rapid treatment to them to help them really have a better outcome than, of course, succumbing to the disease? Plasma antibodies are antibodies that are developed from natural infection. Somebody who's been exposed to COVID and has recovered, their immune system is bolstered by the antibodies in their plasma. And what is going on with the convalescent plasma is they're taking those people who are good enough to come and donate that plasma, which is rich with these antibodies that they got from their own immune system when they saw the natural infection, and they're taking that and they're giving it to patients who have the severe COVID symptoms. And in a broad study, which was with 35,000 plus patients, they were able to see in people who got the plasma antibody timely within 3 days of the severe infection versus those that got it 4 days or later, they saw a significant drop, which is really important in the mortality, meaning those people who actually died of it. And remember, the people with severe symptoms and maybe other medical conditions, etc., are at risk. And those are the ones that we were really learning to fight,
Right.
because that's really ultimately the end of the day. What we're trying to limit and really master is to decrease death related to COVID. That's the ultimate thing.
Sure.
And of course, there are some other therapeutics out there that can help decrease the symptoms. So if you have no symptoms or mild symptoms, that's great. But those who have moderate to severe, how do you turn the corner for them? Plasma, antibody, convalescent plasma, all meaning the same thing. Again, are antibodies from a natural infection that people have recovered from. And it looks like there is a great promise that is clinically significant from the trials that they looked at in terms of it making a real dent in mortality related to COVID.
Okay. Yeah, just one of many, many treatments that are being, that have been developed and are being used right now to really, quite literally, to save lives from people who might otherwise, not survive this disease. Finally, sorry,
it's
go ahead, please.
saying that people, if they have had it and they're certain they've had it and they've recovered from it, to really consider giving and donating the plasma antibody. It is it's heroic. It's what our society needs here in the nation and worldwide, and really we applaud you, but it's actually the least we can do at this very time, because
You think we have enough people donating right now? Enough
well, we
COVID-19
do
patients?
more. I mean, a lot of folks, you think about it, when we talk about the millions of patients who've had COVID, we've not had millions of deaths. We know most of those people, thankfully, have recovered. And for those folks who can do it health-wise, and if you're not sure, call your doctor and find out if you can donate and how to donate it. It is a very important, meaningful thing. And there are a lot of big names and great people around the country who are doing it, but we certainly can use more.
Absolutely. Always. Good to get that message out there. Absolutely. Because it certainly does help. As we wrap up here, Dr. Singh, let's talk a little bit about where we are on the vaccine front. It feels like every week we continue to hear pretty encouraging news in terms of potential vaccines being developed by drug makers in this country, who are moving into those final phase 3 clinical trials where they really want to test their vaccine on a broad cross-section of the public. It sort of raises the question about how important it is for them to be able to get a really diverse cross-section of patients to try out this potential vaccine. And would that be an issue if they didn't get enough people of a certain age or enough people of a certain ethnic background? How important is it to get that really diverse group of patients to test out this vaccine?
It's so important. And, I imagine that there are a lot of people who might be afraid of the vaccine. I would say this: there are an even greater number who are very excited and want to be on it. We know that the very phase 1 trial for Moderna vaccine back in March, the first volunteer was a healthy mother of 2. We know that I've heard that there are people who have tried to even get in on the phase 3 trials of Moderna that started July 24th, and it was backlogged. But the good news is so many other companies who are working hand in hand with the government, the public-private partnerships, have people that they are looking for all phases of this. And in the very beginning, of course, it'll be those who are willing to and wanting to. And I suspect there'll be a list, but we'll also be able to prioritize essential workers, those who are at high risk, vulnerable, of course, across the nation. And all of these companies, with the government's resources and backing, are simultaneously manufacturing the capacity to do the millions and billions of doses, as well as the dissemination. But definitely, we will need people of all backgrounds, of all different demographics, ages, and different medical conditions to really understand what are the, different potential concerns. But they are actually, that's what they're studying in the phase 3 clinical trials, are these potential what are the risks and adverse effects, et cetera. That's what's being done in the safety and efficacy evaluation. I just look forward to the fact that we have such accelerated science and innovation going on.
Sure.
And if people wonder how that's even possible, usually the limitation in advancing science so much is resources. We don't have that much money often to run large-scale trials for any particular vaccine at any given time. Public interest has to be there. The government has to be committed to it. And NIH and the whole HHS team and crew are putting a lot of money into all these trials to allow for the scientific community to do their job, hire more people, and get the answer to a vaccine for COVID. And I will also say this, there will be a variety of different types of vaccines that act in different ways. One is by recognizing the coronavirus spike protein. Others will be the traditional live and dead viruses,
Right.
and even more interesting RNA technology.
Yeah. Yeah, the mRNA is really intriguing because we haven't had a vaccine using that technology as of yet. So this is going to be, that would be breaking some new ground. On the vaccine front, I mean, once a vaccine is given the green light, it's found to be safe and effective in these phase 3 trials. Do you still have concerns about a fair number of people in this country who are hesitant about wanting to take this vaccine? There's been some polls out there. It does sound like there are people who would still have concerns, even after it clears all the regulatory hurdles and is proven safe and effective. There might be some people who are hesitant to take it. Does there need to be a campaign that kind of starts right now to instill confidence in the American people that once we have a safe and effective vaccine, we need folks to take it in order for it to do its job?
Absolutely. The purpose of the vaccine is to give our body, our immunity, a head start in building the defense so that they're unlikely to get the vaccine, even if the virus, even if exposed to it. This is really important for every individual, because then you'll have the defense system, if you will, even when exposed to the virus, and it limits transmission. It has a huge domino effect. We have, as a nation and as a world, found vaccines to be unbelievable in terms of addressing those types of diseases that really people would succumb to globally. And vaccines have been the answer in those cases. You think about smallpox, measles, and so many others. It keeps the influenza virus even at bay. Influenza, as we know, has a potential death rate in kids and adults or elderly. And it actually, if nothing else, attenuates it. And so we understand how vaccines work. We've had great experience with it worldwide. It has eradicated diseases that would actually lead to infant child mortality. You think about, it wasn't that long ago that having a kid, pass away in a family, having 2 or 3 kids pass away from any number of diseases used to be the case. So it has really eradicated some of those diseases. So we know it works. It has huge value. I understand completely the worry and fear people have about adverse effects from any medicine, anything that we take, a shot. There's always a potential of some improbable, unlikely adverse event. But all in all, this is safer than just being they're exposed to the COVID virus. And these trials are really going to emphasize that to us. I can tell you that because there's so many competing efforts going on, that there's not going to be some hidden thing that gets bias. Again, can somebody have a bad, unexpected reaction to, like, say, lightning striking? Yes, but it's rare, it's uncommon.
Yeah.
And I would go with what's more likely to help us, not only health-wise, but also get through this so that we can start the economy, get our kids back in school, and all the good stuff that we all know we want so badly.
Yeah, having as many people as possible taking this vaccine, that's the key to really getting back to something resembling life as we know it in this country. So we're certainly looking forward to that happening here as soon as possible. We'll leave the conversation right there. Always good to catch up with you, and we always appreciate your time, Dr. Vanila Singh, clinical professor at Stanford School of Medicine and the former chief medical officer with the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm Alex Savidge from KTVU Fox 2 News in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I will talk to you next time.